There comes a moment in every life when silence becomes louder than noise, when absence speaks more truth than presence, and when stepping back from the world reveals who and what was really standing with you. It is in this moment, when you stop being endlessly available, that everything begins to change. The power of withdrawal lies in its capacity to reveal the truth that constant presence often conceals. When a person is perpetually available to friends, partners, colleagues, they become part of the background, taken for granted like the air we breathe. This constancy, though often born from kindness or responsibility, becomes an invisible thread binding them to the expectations and projections of others. Over time, availability becomes a form of identity, the reliable one, the helper, the fixer. But what happens when that identity is interrupted? When one steps back, not in malice, but in stillness and self-reflection. Withdrawal disturbs the established patterns of relational dynamics. It breaks the mirror in which others have grown used to seeing their needs reflected. In that space, people can no longer rely on your energy to regulate their emotional states. Suddenly, your absence becomes louder than your presence ever was. This is not about manipulation or creating drama. It is about allowing the natural flow of energy to reset. People are forced to confront their own motivations. Were they connected to you because of genuine bond or because of convenience? Did they value you or did they value what you did for them? The moment you stop being the available one, the veils fall. In that silence, you begin to witness something profound, the way people scramble to maintain the previous status quo, or conversely, how effortlessly some drift away. The shift is rarely neutral. Those who have become dependent on your emotional labor may react with anger, guilt, tripping, or passive aggression. The reaction is not necessarily a reflection of cruelty, but of exposure. When someone steps away, it confronts others with their dependency, their expectations, their unspoken contracts. They are made to realize how much of the relationship was held together by your willingness to be constantly present. But more importantly, the power of withdrawal works internally as well. In choosing to step back, you begin to see the unconscious patterns that led to over-availability in the first place. Was your constant presence a way of feeling useful? Was it a method to avoid your own discomfort? A distraction from your unmet needs? Often individuals who struggle to say no or take space for themselves are unconsciously operating from early experiences of conditional love, where approval was granted in exchange for compliance or service. The withdrawal, then, becomes not just a behavioral change, but a confrontation with the self. One begins to ask, who am I without the role I play in others' lives? What remains when the performance stops? As others react to your absence, their behavior becomes data, not in a cold, analytical sense, but in a revealing, psychological one. You see, with painful clarity, who respects your autonomy and who only engaged with you as long as you were useful. This knowledge, though difficult, is liberating. It empowers discernment. It teaches where to reinvest your time, your care, your attention. It allows love to be redefined, not as obligation, but as something reciprocal, dynamic, and alive. Withdrawal is not an act of punishment. It is an act of revelation. In the quiet that follows your absence, everything that was hidden in the noise of availability surfaces. Not only do others reveal themselves, but so do you. The tendency to always be available, to overextend, to say yes even when the soul screams no, often stems not from pure generosity, but from unconscious patterns deeply rooted in the psyche. At the center of this behavior lies the shadow of people-pleasing, a psychological phenomenon born out of early conditioning. social expectation, and the construction of what psychologists call the persona. The persona is the social mask we wear to gain acceptance, to be loved, and to avoid rejection. It is not inherently false, but when we over-identify with it, we lose touch with our authentic self. For many, the persona of the helper, the reliable one, or the peacekeeper becomes so dominant that they forget there is a whole being beneath the mask who also has needs, desires, and limits. People-pleasing becomes a way of navigating the world by minimizing threat, emotional, social, or relational. It is often developed in childhood environments where love was conditional, where praise came only through compliance, achievement, or emotional caretaking. The child learns, sometimes without words, that being good means being agreeable, useful, and emotionally available. Over time, this lesson embeds itself in the unconscious. As an adult, the same individual might find it almost impossible to say no without guilt or fear. They become hyper-attuned to the needs of others and desensitized to their own. The desire to be liked, to avoid conflict, to maintain harmony becomes so powerful that it overrides authentic expression. When someone exists in this pattern, their availability is not just physical or logistical. It is emotional, energetic, and spiritual. They become the first to answer calls, the ones who drop everything when needed, the ones who anticipate problems before others even realize they exist. At first glance, this seems noble, but underneath, it is often a survival strategy, a way of maintaining connection at the cost of self. The shadow aspect of this behavior lies in its imbalance. By prioritizing others constantly, they unconsciously communicate that their own needs do not matter, that their value lies only in their service. This shadow eventually manifests in fatigue, resentment, and emotional depletion. The people-pleaser becomes internally divided. Outwardly, they are helpful and warm. Inwardly, they are exhausted and quietly angry. They may begin to feel invisible or unappreciated, but they struggle to assert boundaries for fear of losing love or approval. Herein lies the painful paradox. They seek connection by being endlessly available, but in doing so they often attract relationships where they are not truly seen. Their presence is expected, not cherished. Their energy is consumed, not reciprocated. The unconscious mind starts to revolt. The body may react with tension, illness, or burnout. The soul begins to whisper, then shout, that this way of being is no longer sustainable. But transformation cannot occur until the shadow is seen. The people-pleasing pattern must be brought into conscious awareness, not to be condemned, but to be understood. It was once a protective mechanism, a way to survive, but now it has become a prison. To break free requires the courage to confront the fear of rejection, to risk not being liked in order to be authentic, and to recognize that love, rooted in performance, is not love at all. When this inner work begins, availability transforms into intentional presence. No longer driven by unconscious guilt or fear, the individual learns to offer themselves in ways that are genuine and balanced. They begin to listen to their inner voice, to honor their own rhythms, and to build connections that nourish rather than drain. The mask loosens. The true self emerges, not perfect, not always agreeable, but whole. Energy, in the psychological sense, is not an abstract or poetic idea. It is a real, limited resource. Much like money, it must be spent wisely, invested strategically, and protected from waste. When one is constantly available, emotionally, mentally, or physically, one is in a state of energetic expenditure, without regulation, the more accessible you are to everyone at every moment, the more your energy is diluted across conversations, obligations, and emotional entanglements that may not serve your growth or well-being. This constant dispersion leads to a subtle, chronic depletion. You may still function, still smile, still fulfill your duties, but there's an invisible drain that continues to empty your internal reserves, and over time, that loss begins to manifest in symptoms: anxiety, irritability, fatigue, a sense of losing touch with yourself. When someone does not value their own energy, they unconsciously teach others to do the same. Being always available often sends a silent signal to the world that your boundaries are permeable, that your time is not sacred, that your needs are secondary. It becomes easy for others to assume you will always say yes, that you will always be there, that your presence can be taken for granted. Even the kindest people, without malice, can begin to exploit that openness, not because they are bad, but because human beings tend to respond to what is given freely without requiring effort or reciprocity. In this way, your availability can unintentionally invite disrespect, not overtly, but through a lack of appreciation or consideration. This dynamic is often invisible until one begins to withhold that energy. The shift can be subtle, responding to messages later, saying no more frequently, choosing silence instead of automatic engagement. But even these small acts can produce powerful reactions. Those who have grown used to your constant presence may express confusion or frustration. They may feel entitled to your energy because it has always been given so freely, and yet, in that very entitlement lies the revelation. Your energy was never truly being honored, only consumed. To treat your energy as currency is to recognize its intrinsic value. Just as you would not hand out your money to everyone who asks without consideration, so too must you be discerning about where your emotional, mental, and spiritual effort goes. This does not mean becoming cold or detached. On the contrary, it is about conscious giving rather than compulsive giving. It is about offering your presence in a way that is grounded, intentional, and sustainable. In this way, your energy becomes a reflection of your self-worth. You begin to ask, does this interaction feed me or deplete me? Is this connection reciprocal or is it one-sided? Am I acting from guilt or from genuine desire? The moment you begin to guard your energy as something precious, your relationship with the world changes. Some people will fall away, not because you have become selfish, but because their connection to you depended on your lack of boundaries. Others will grow closer, drawn to your authenticity and inner strength. But more importantly, you begin to draw closer to yourself. You stop scattering your energy into the world, hoping to be validated, and you begin to gather it inward, creating a center of gravity that is stable, powerful, and whole. In this center you find a new kind of presence, one that is not reactive or draining, but luminous and deeply rooted. Transformation through solitude is one of the most overlooked but profoundly necessary stages of psychological growth. In a world that constantly demands presence, reaction, and performance, solitude is often misinterpreted as loneliness or avoidance. But solitude, when entered consciously, is a gateway to the deeper dimensions of the self. It is not the absence of people, but the presence of the self without distortion. When one steps away from the noise of social roles and obligations, when the expectations of others fade into the background, a different kind of voice begins to emerge, a quieter, more honest one that has been buried beneath years of adaptation and distraction. The psychological process that unfolds in solitude mirrors what some call the path of individuation. This is not about becoming isolated or detached from others, but about integrating all parts of oneself that have been split off, ignored, or suppressed in order to fit into the social world. Constant availability, after all, often forces us to fragment our inner world to meet outer demands. We become versions of ourselves tailored to the needs of others, supportive, cheerful, helpful, agreeable, while deeper emotions and truths go unexpressed. Solitude disrupts this pattern. It removes the mirrors in which we constantly check how we are perceived, and in their place we begin to see our own unfiltered reflection. In solitude, time slows. External validation loses its grip. The masks we wear start to slip, and we are left with what is real, our fears, our longings, our wounds, and also our forgotten strengths. This can be an uncomfortable process. The silence of solitude forces confrontation. There is nowhere to hide. Emotions we've numbed with busyness start to surface. We may feel sadness, anger, emptiness, or confusion, but these feelings are not signs that something is wrong. They are signs that something is awakening. The transformation begins not by fixing them, but by witnessing them, allowing them, integrating them. In doing so, the fragmented parts of the psyche begin to cohere into something whole. Solitude also allows one to reconnect with intuitive knowing. In the chaos of external life, intuition is often drowned out by noise, logic, or fear of judgment. But in solitude, patterns begin to reveal themselves. The mind becomes clearer, and the inner compass, long ignored, starts to recalibrate. We begin to understand what truly matters, what needs to be released, and where our energy is being misplaced. Insight that cannot be accessed through conversation or analysis alone begins to rise naturally from within. This inner alignment has outer consequences. When one emerges from a period of solitude, they are often changed, not in a dramatic, performative way, but in essence. They speak less, but say more. They act not to please, but from a place of clarity. Their boundaries become firmer, their choices more deliberate. The relationships they choose to maintain are ones that resonate with their true self, not their former roles. Others may not understand the shift, but that no longer matters. What matters is the self has been reclaimed. Through solitude, the individual does not become less connected to the world. They become better able to relate to it from a grounded, authentic place. The transformation is subtle but irreversible. There is a return to center, a remembrance of something original and unshaped by the hands of others. And from this place, a new kind of life begins to take form, one that is less reactive, more intentional, and deeply aligned with inner truth. The shift in others' behavior when you stop being constantly available is one of the clearest mirrors life offers. It reveals the depth, or lack thereof, in your connections. When your energy, time, and emotional presence have been a consistent offering, many grow to expect it as a given. They weave your availability into the rhythm of their own lives, often unconsciously, as though your support and response are not choices but obligations. For a long time this can go unnoticed. You keep showing up, saying yes, listening deeply, offering help, and in doing so you create an unspoken pattern that begins to define the relationship. But when you disrupt that rhythm by stepping back, by prioritizing yourself, or even by going quiet, that pattern begins to break, and what has been buried beneath comfort and expectation is suddenly exposed. The moment you stop being available, some people will feel offended. They will perceive your withdrawal not as a neutral act of self-care or inner redirection, but as an attack. This is not because you have wronged them, but because your presence had been fulfilling a need they may not have even realized they had. Perhaps your constant emotional labor helped them avoid dealing with their own issues. Maybe your support shield shielded them from having to build inner resilience. When that buffer is removed, they must confront parts of themselves that they have long outsourced to you. This confrontation is uncomfortable, and rather than face it, they may project blame onto you. They may say you've changed, become distant, or uncaring, but in truth, you've simply stopped sacrificing yourself to meet needs that were never yours to carry. Others will disappear. These are the ones whose relationship with you was always transactional, though likely not in an intentional or cruel way. Your usefulness, your responsiveness, your emotional labor was the glue. Once that disappears, so too does their interest. Their absence is not punishment, it is clarity. It shows that the relationship was dependent not on who you are, but on what you give. While this can be painful to witness, it is also liberating. It frees you from the illusion of connection where none truly existed. You no longer have to sustain facades or pour energy into spaces where your presence is consumed but not valued. Yet there will also be those who stay. These are the ones who don't flinch when you step back. They don't guilt you for needing space. They understand, even without explanation, that true connection isn't measured by frequency or availability, but by depth, respect, and authenticity. These people will not try to pull you back into your old patterns. Instead, they will give you room to breathe, and when you return, they will meet you where you are. These relationships often deepen after withdrawal, because they are built on truth, not dependency. The behavior of others in response to your withdrawal becomes a form of revelation. It does not define your worth, but it defines the nature of your bonds. In this light, your absence becomes as meaningful as your presence. It becomes a filter through which the genuine rises and the false falls away. The people who stay without needing you to shrink, to bend, or to overextend are the ones worth growing with. Everyone else has served their purpose as mirrors, as teachers, as reminders, and can be released without bitterness. Because once you stop being always available, you stop being who the world thinks you are, and you start becoming who you truly are. When you withdraw your constant presence and reclaim your boundaries, something fundamental begins to shift inside you. A quiet, internal authority starts to awaken. This authority does not arrive with noise, ego, or the need for validation. It grows slowly, almost invisibly at first, like a root system extending beneath the surface of your being. What once felt like duty, answering every call, being emotionally available to all, offering parts of yourself to whoever asked, starts to feel foreign, almost unnatural. Instead of being pulled outward by obligation, you start to feel drawn inward by a sense of self-respect that was perhaps dormant for years. And as this inner authority grows, it reorders your life from the inside out. For a long time, many people move through life governed by external forces, social norms, expectations, unspoken contracts and relationships, and the deeply ingrained belief that worthiness is earned through service, performance, or compliance. But when you begin to stop being available in the way others expect, when you stop performing emotional labor for relationships that don't nourish you, you begin to see how much of your identity was constructed to meet others' needs. In that seeing, something essential is born. The realization that you do not need to be everything for everyone to be worthy of space, of peace, of love. This realization is not intellectual, it is embodied. It lives in your silence, your stillness, your refusal to overextend. As this inner strength begins to stabilize, your decisions become less reactive. You no longer say yes out of guilt or fear of disappointing others. You say yes only when it aligns with your truth. You no longer respond immediately to every demand or request. You pause, you assess, and you choose. This choosing is the evidence of your growing self-possession, and in that pause, in that space between the pull and your response, there is power. It is the power of discernment, of sovereignty, of quiet confidence that does not need to be proven or explained. The paradox is that the more you come home to yourself, the more magnetic you become, not because you are trying to be, but because people can sense when someone is rooted in themselves. They feel the difference between someone who gives from fullness and someone who gives from a need to be needed. Your boundaries stop being barriers and start becoming beacons. They teach others how to approach you, how to respect your time, your heart, your energy. Some will resist this change. Others will be drawn to it, not out of desire to consume it, but to learn from it, to mirror it in themselves. Inner strength does not shout. It does not beg to be noticed. It does not seek applause. It simply is. It shows up in the way you protect your peace, the way you no longer chase connection that feels forced, the way you sit in your solitude without panic. It reveals itself in your capacity to say no with kindness and yes with intention. And over time, it builds a life around you that reflects this internal order, a life that holds more truth, more alignment, and more. When you stop being constantly available to the world, you become constantly available to yourself. And from that place of inner anchoring, everything begins to shift. Not because you forced change, but because you embodied it. When you stop being available to everyone, you begin becoming available to yourself, and that changes the entire structure of your life. What falls away was never meant to stay, and what remains finds you through authenticity, not obligation. You no longer waste your energy trying to be understood by those committed to misunderstanding you. You no longer seek validation from spaces where your worth was only measured by what you gave. In your withdrawal, you don't vanish. You emerge. Clearer, stronger, aligned. And as the noise fades, you'll find that everything that truly belongs to you meets you in your stillness, not your striving. Because it's not the world you lose when you stop being available. It's the illusion of yourself that was never truly you to begin with.